The auctioneer's hammer was about to fall when Clara Hayes realized the unthinkable. They were actually going to sell her. Not just her baby, too. Standing on that auction block in Redemption Creek, Montana, with her 6-month-old son crying against her chest, she understood that everything her husband had died for meant nothing. The banker's smile was cruel. The crowd's silence was worse. Then hooves thundered through the dust, and a cowboy she'd never seen before spoke 2 words that changed everything. "I'll take them." Before we begin, if you enjoy stories of courage, redemption, and unexpected heroes, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Stay with us until the very end. You won't believe how this turns out. And comment below with what city you're watching from, so we can see how far Clara's story travels across the world. Clara Hayes had buried her husband on a Tuesday. By Friday, the banker came calling. "Lot 47, the auctioneer's voice cut through the August heat. "One widow woman, age 24, good health. Can cook, sew, read, and write, plus 1 male infant, approximately 6 months. She stood on that wooden platform legs, shaking so hard she thought her knees would buckle. Noah whimpered against her chest, his tiny fist clutching her worn shawl. The sun hammered down on Redemption Creek's town square. 100 pairs of eyes crawled over her like she was livestock. "This is wrong," she whispered. Nobody heard, or maybe they just didn't care. Samuel Blackwood stood at the platform's edge, arms crossed, looking satisfied. His white suit stayed immaculate despite the dust covering everything else in this town. He'd orchestrated this whole nightmare, and he wasn't even trying to hide his pleasure. "We'll start the bidding at $20, the auctioneer announced. $20. That's what her life was worth. Her and Noah's future, their freedom, their dignity. $20. A miner raised his hand. 20. 25. Clara's throat closed. 3 months. Thomas had been dead 3 months, and already she was standing here like chattel. The debts had appeared the day after the funeral notes with Thomas's signature that she'd never seen before, loans she'd never heard him mention. The house went first, then the furniture, then her wedding ring, now this. 40, someone called. 45. The voices swirled around her, men bidding on her life like she was a horse they might need come spring. Noah started crying harder. She tried to rock him, tried to give him comfort when she had none left to give. 50 for the woman, a gravelly voice from the back. "Don't need the kid, though. You splitting the lot." Clara's head snapped up. A big man with a scar running down his cheek was staring at her like she was something he might use and discard. The implication made bile rise in her throat. "The lot stays together," Blackwood said. But there was consideration in his tone, calculation. "However, accommodations could potentially be made." "No," the word ripped out of her. "You can't separate us. He's my son. Please, you can't." The crowd shifted. A few women looked away. One dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. But nobody spoke up. Nobody ever spoke up in Redemption Creek when Samuel Blackwood was involved. "Mrs. Hayes." Blackwood climbed onto the platform, his boots clicking. He lowered his voice, but the front rows could still hear every word. "You're in no position to make demands. Your husband's debts are considerable. This is entirely legal. You should be grateful we're offering shelter and employment instead of the poorhouse." "Employment?" Her voice cracked. "You're selling us like..." "Careful." His eyes went cold. "That's dangerously close to slander. I have documentation, legal documentation. Your husband borrowed extensively, made poor investments. The debts are real and they've come due. Now, are you going to cooperate, or do I need to have the sheriff remove the child from your arms?" Clara felt the world tilt. Thomas didn't borrow money. He would have told me. Clearly, he didn't tell you everything. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, can we continue? I have 50 on the table." 55. 60, said the scarred man. 65. Clara closed her eyes. She thought about Thomas, about the last morning she'd seen him alive. He'd kissed her forehead, kissed Noah's tiny hand, promised he'd be home for supper. The mine collapse had killed him and two other men instantly. They'd brought his body home covered in dust and blood, and she'd screamed until her throat was raw. If he could see her now standing here like this, what would he think? $70. The gravelly voice again. Final offer, but I want assurances about the child. Don't need a squalling brat underfoot while I'm working the claim. Working the claim, not raising a family, not building a home. Working. The word told Clara everything she needed to know about what this man expected from his purchase. Blackwood stepped forward to respond, but before he could speak, hoofbeats. Distant at first, then closer. Thunder rolling down Main Street. The crowd turned necks, craning to see. A rider came hard through the dust, his horse's hooves throwing up clouds of dirt. He wasn't slowing. If anything, he was coming faster. What the hell? The auctioneer started. The rider burst into the square, and for one heart-stopping moment, Clara thought he'd ride straight into the crowd. Women screamed. Men stumbled back. But the cowboy pulled his horse up short, right at the platform's edge, so close, the dust washed over everyone. He sat there silhouetted against the sun. Then he swung down in one smooth motion and stepped into the light. Tall, lean. Dark hair that needed cutting, 3 days of stubble shadowing his jaw. His clothes were trail-worn, his boots dusty, and there was something hard around his eyes. Something that said he'd seen things most men couldn't imagine, but when those eyes found Clara's, they softened. Just for a second, but she saw it. This the auction. His voice was quiet. It carried anyway. It is. Blackwood recovered his composure. And you're interrupting a legal proceeding. Who are you? The cowboy ignored him completely. He kept his eyes on Clara, and she couldn't look away. There was something in his gaze, recognition. She'd never seen this man before in her life. What's the bid at? He asked. $70, the auctioneer said. But son, this is a debt settlement. It's not exactly a regular $100. The square went dead silent. The cowboy reached inside his jacket, pulled out a leather pouch. He tossed it onto the platform where it landed with a heavy clink that sounded like freedom. I'll take them both, he said. No conditions, no splitting. Clara's breath stopped. $100. That was more than most men in this town made in half a year, and he was just offering it for her. Now hold on. Blackwood's face flushed. We don't know who you are. This is highly irregular. I need to verify your name's Jack Mercer. Got banknotes from Denver, all legal. But that there's gold coin and it's more than any bid you've had. Jack's voice stayed calm, deadly calm, unless you're saying this isn't really about the debt. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Blackwood's jaw worked. Several people in the crowd murmured. Clara could see the wheels turning in the banker's head. He wanted to refuse. She could tell. But with this many witnesses with actual gold on the table, he was trapped. Let me see it. Blackwood snatched the pouch. He opened it, examined the contents, even bit one of the coins, his movements sharp with barely controlled anger. His face went rigid. It's legitimate, he admitted through clenched teeth. However, I'll still need proper identification documentation of, is the bid accepted or not? Jack cut him off. Because if it's not, I'd be real interested to know why you'd turn down hard gold. Be even more interested to write the territorial governor about it. I'm sure he'd want to know about debt auctions that sell women and children in his territory, especially when the debts can't be properly verified. The crowd went still. Clara's heart hammered. This stranger, this Jack Mercer, he wasn't just buying her. He was challenging Blackwood, publicly. The banker's knuckles went white around the pouch. The bid is accepted, $100. Lot 47 goes to... He could barely get the words out. Jack Mercer. The auctioneer brought his hammer down. Sold. Just like that. Clara felt her legs give out. Jack moved fast up onto the platform, catching her elbow before she fell. His hand was warm through her sleeve, steady. Easy now, he said quietly. I've got you. I don't understand. Her voice came out broken. "Who are you? Why would you? Let's get you down from here first." He guided her down the steps, Noah still clutched to her chest. The crowd parted, silent, watching. Clara could feel their eyes, their judgment, their curiosity burning into her back. Blackwood was counting the gold, his face twisted with rage. "I'll need her to sign release papers, and you'll need to provide proper—" "Send them to the Silver Star Hotel," Jack said without looking back. "I'll be there tomorrow morning. Right now the lady needs rest." "You can't just walk away with—" Jack turned. Whatever Blackwood saw in his face made the banker step back. "Tomorrow morning," Jack repeated. "That going to be a problem?" Blackwood's mouth opened, closed. "No problem." Jack nodded once, then turned to Clara. "Can you ride?" Yes, I think so." "Good." He led her to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding standing calm despite the chaos. "I'm going to lift you up. Hold the baby tight." Before she could respond, his hands were on her waist, lifting her into the saddle like she weighed nothing. Then he swung up behind her. His arms came around to grip the reins, forming a protective circle around her and Noah. "Where are we going?" she managed. "Away from here." He clicked his tongue and the horse moved. Clara looked back once. The crowd still stood there, frozen. Blackwood's face was purple with fury. The scarred man looked disappointed, cheated of his prize. Then they turned the corner and Redemption Creek disappeared. They rode in silence. Clara became aware of things in pieces. The warmth of Jack's chest against her back. The steady rhythm of hoofbeats. Noah's breathing evening out as he finally fell asleep exhausted from crying. The smell of pine and dust and leather. Her mind couldn't catch up. 20 minutes ago she'd been standing on an auction block. Now she was riding away with a stranger who'd paid a fortune for her freedom. "I can't pay you back," she said finally. "I don't have anything. Whatever you think this was, I don't want payment." "Then why? You don't even know me." Silence stretched between them. When Jack finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I knew your husband." Clara's breath caught. "You knew Thomas. We rode together during the war, different regiments, but our paths crossed at Missionary Ridge. He pulled me out of a ditch with half the Confederate Army shooting at us. Saved my life." Thomas never mentioned. "We lost touch after. I went west. He went wherever the wind took him, I guess." Jack's arms tightened slightly. "I rode into town this morning, heard people talking, found out he was dead, found out what Blackwood was doing to you." His voice went hard. "Nobody should have let it get that far. Law or no law, it's wrong." Tears started down Clara's face, silent, unstoppable. She'd been holding them back for so long, through Thomas's death, through losing everything, through the horror of today. "He didn't gamble," she whispered, sighed. "Thomas didn't borrow money or make bad investments. Those debts Blackwood showed, I never saw any of it, not once." "I believe you. But there were papers. His signature. Papers can be forged, especially when there's profit in it and nobody left to fight back." Jack's voice was grim. "Blackwood's been running this game for years. Fines folks who've lost someone, claims debt, takes everything. Most people leave town rather than fight. But selling a woman and her baby—" He trailed off. "That's a new low." Clara held Noah closer. His small body was warm against her chest, his breathing soft and even. "Safe. For now." "What happens next?" she asked. "Next—" Jack was quiet for a moment. "Next we get you somewhere safe, somewhere you can rest. Tomorrow we deal with Blackwood's papers." "But the papers you own—" The words stuck like glass in her throat. "I don't own anything," Jack said, firm and immediate. "Those papers Blackwood wants signed, they're going to say you're released from debt and free to go wherever you want. You're not my property, Mrs. Hayes. You're not anyone's property. Not anymore." The relief hit her so hard she nearly sobbed. "Then why spend all that money just to let me go?" "Because sometimes the only way to beat a rigged game is to play along just long enough to flip the table over." They rode on, The sun sank toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and deep purple. Clara felt exhaustion pulling at her like an undertow. She tried to fight it, tried to stay alert. "Where are we going?" she asked again. "My ranch, 2 hours north. Small place, nothing fancy, but it's private. You and the boy can rest there while we figure out next steps." "I can't impose on you. Mrs. Hayes." Jack's voice was gentle but unyielding. "Right now you don't have choices. Blackwood's going to be furious. He might try to come after you, claim some irregularity with the sale, say I didn't have proper authorization. You need to be somewhere he can't reach, at least for a few days." He paused. "Will you trust me that far?" Clara thought about the scarred man's eyes, about standing on that platform with Noah knowing any second they could be separated forever, about Blackwood's cold, calculating smile. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll trust you." "Good. Rest if you can. I'll wake you when we're close." She shouldn't sleep. Every instinct screamed it was dangerous sleeping in a stranger's arms, on a stranger's horse heading to God knows where. But her body had nothing left. Noah was already asleep. The horse's movement was rhythmic, hypnotic, and Jack's presence at her back felt safe. Impossibly, inexplicably safe. Clara's eyes drifted shut. She dreamed of Thomas, of the last morning. He'd been running late for his shift at the mine, gulping coffee while she'd tried to get him to eat something. Noah had been crying and Thomas had scooped him up, making silly faces until the baby laughed. "I'll be home for supper," he'd promised, kissing her forehead. "We'll celebrate." Celebrate what? 3 months of keeping this little man alive, that's worth celebrating. He'd handed Noah back, grabbed his lunch pail, paused at the door. "Love you, Clara girl." "Love you too." Those were the last words they'd ever said to each other. In the dream, she tried to call him back, tried to tell him not to go to the mine that day, but her voice wouldn't work, and he walked out the door into darkness. "Mrs. Hayes," Jack's voice pulled her back. "We're here." Clara blinked awake. The sun had set. Stars were emerging in a sky so big and dark it seemed to swallow everything. They were climbing a narrow trail through pine trees. She could hear water running somewhere close. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, trying to sit straighter. "I didn't mean to fall asleep. You needed it." A few minutes later they emerged into a clearing. In the starlight, Clara could make out a cabin, small but solid-looking, with a barn and corral nearby. Smoke rose from the chimney. "Someone's here?" she asked, suddenly nervous. "No, asked a neighbor to come by earlier, get a fire going, stock some supplies." Jack dismounted, then reached up to help her down. "Figured you'd need warmth and food more than explanations tonight." He'd planned this. Somehow, between hearing about the auction and riding into town, he'd arranged shelter for her. The kindness of it made her throat tight. Her legs shook when her feet hit the ground. Jack kept a hand on her elbow until she was steady. "Come on," he said. "It's not much, but it is warm." The cabin was simple. One main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs. A ladder led up to a sleeping loft, but it was clean. The fire made it warm, and there was a pot over the flames that smelled like beef stew and made her stomach clench with sudden desperate hunger. "Bedroom's up there," Jack pointed to the loft. "I'll sleep down here by the fire. There's bread and stew, help yourself. Water's in the bucket by the door, fresh from the creek this afternoon." Clara stood in the middle of the room, holding Noah, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's life. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything." Jack moved to the fireplace, checking the pot. "You hungry?" She was starving. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. Yesterday, the day before, yes. "Sit then." Clara sank into one of the chairs, grateful beyond words. Jack moved around the small kitchen with the easy efficiency of a man used to taking care of himself. He ladled stew into a bowl, cut thick slices of bread, poured water into a tin cup, set it all in front of her, then stepped back like he was giving a wild animal space. "What about you?" she asked. "I'll eat after. You need it more." She wanted to argue, but Noah was starting to fuss, hungry himself and needing to be changed. I need to feed him. Of course. Jack was already heading for the door. I'll see to the horse. Take your time. He was outside before she could thank him. Clara sat there for a long moment staring at the bowl of stew. Steam rose from it in lazy curls. Her hands were shaking. She was free. The thought hit her all over again. Free, not owned, not sold to the scarred man who'd wanted her without her son, not trapped in whatever nightmare Blackwood had planned. Free. She started to cry. Quiet at first, then harder until her whole body shook with it. Noah squirmed against her chest, and she realized she was holding him too tight. She loosened her grip, pressed her face against his soft hair, and let herself break down completely. All the fear, all the grief, all the horror of the last 3 months came pouring out in cracking sobs that she muffled against Noah's blanket so Jack wouldn't hear. Outside, Jack stood in the darkness next to his horse, listening to the sound of Clara's crying through the cabin walls. He'd lied to her. Not about knowing Thomas, that part was true. They had ridden together during the war. Thomas Hayes had saved his life at Missionary Ridge, pulled him out of that ditch while bullets tore up the ground around them. But that wasn't why Jack had bought her freedom today. He'd been in Redemption Creek for 3 days, not one morning. He'd heard about the auction 2 days ago, had time to think it through, talk himself out of it, talk himself back into it. He could have stopped it quietly, could have paid Blackwood off in private, avoided the whole public spectacle. But he'd wanted everyone to see, wanted them to witness Blackwood being forced to accept that gold, wanted the whole town to know that someone had stood up and said, "No, this isn't right. This ends now." Maybe that made him a fool. Maybe it made him dangerous. Blackwood wasn't going to forget this humiliation. Men like him never did. Jack unsaddled his horse, his movements automatic. The bay nickered softly and he ran a hand down its neck. "I know," he murmured. "I know it's complicated." Inside the cabin, Clara's crying had quieted. He could hear her moving around now, taking care of the baby, eating, hopefully. He should have just paid the debt and walked away. Should have let her go her own way with enough money to start fresh somewhere else. That would have been the smart thing, the safe thing. Instead, he'd brought her here, to his home, the place he'd spent 5 years building into something that mattered, something permanent. And now there was a woman and a baby inside, and Jack had no idea what he was going to do about it. He finished with the horse, made sure it had feed and water, then stood there in the dark for a long time. The cabin glowed warm in the night. Through the window he could see Clara moving around inside. She'd taken off her bonnet. Her hair was dark, falling loose around her shoulders. She was beautiful. The thought came unbidden and unwelcome. He pushed it away. She'd just lost her husband 3 months ago. She'd been traumatized, humiliated, nearly sold like livestock. The last thing she needed was some man looking at her that way. The last thing Jack needed was to start feeling things he had no business feeling. He'd done the right thing today, saved a woman and her child from a terrible fate. Tomorrow he'd sign whatever papers made her legally free, give her enough money to start over somewhere safe, and send her on her way. Clean, simple, done. That was the plan. Jack took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked back toward the cabin. Inside, Clara had fed Noah and changed him using a cloth from her small bundle of possessions. She'd eaten half the bowl of stew before her stomach had rebelled too long without food, and now it couldn't handle much. But she felt better, stronger. She'd washed her face in the cold water from the bucket, pinned her hair back up, tried to make herself presentable. When Jack came back inside, she was standing by the fire, rocking Noah gently. "Thank you," she said, "for the food, for all of this." Jack nodded, shrugging out of his jacket. "You should sleep. It's been a long day." "What about you?" "I'll keep the fire going. Sleep down here." Clara hesitated. There were so many questions, so many things she needed to understand, but exhaustion was pulling at her again, and Noah was already asleep in her arms. "Mr. Mercer." Jack, just Jack. Jack. The name felt strange on her tongue. What did you mean earlier about Blackwood running this game for years? Jack was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. You're not the first widow he's done this to. Won't be the last unless someone stops him. He finds people who've lost someone, claims they owed money, produces documents forged most likely, but who's going to fight it? He takes their property, their savings. Sometimes he arranges employment. That's just another word for servitude. Usually people leave town before it gets that far. But he's never sold anyone before. Not that I know of. Like I said, new low even for him. Clara felt cold despite the fire. Why me? Why us? Because you had nowhere to go, no family in town, no one to fight for you. Jack's jaw tightened. And because he knew he could get away with it. But he didn't, because you stopped him. Their eyes met across the small cabin. Something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition of something neither of them was ready to name. Get some sleep, Mrs. Hayes, Jack said quietly. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. Clara nodded. She climbed the ladder to the loft, Noah cradled carefully in one arm. The space was small but clean. There was a bed with actual blankets, more luxury than she'd had in months. She laid Noah down carefully, built a small barrier of rolled blankets, so he couldn't roll off the bed, then lay down beside him. Below, she could hear Jack moving around, adding wood to the fire, the scrape of a chair, then silence. Clara stared up at the dark ceiling, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. Who was Jack Mercer really? Why had he helped her, and what would happen tomorrow when Blackwood came calling because he would come calling? Men like him always did, but for tonight she was warm, she was fed, she was safe. And her son was sleeping peacefully beside her. That would have to be enough. Clara closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. Outside, the Montana night stretched vast and endless. Stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere in the darkness a wolf howled. And in Redemption Creek, Samuel Blackwood sat in his office staring at $100 in gold, planning his revenge. Clara woke to the sound of an axe splitting wood. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her was rough timber, not the painted plaster of the house she'd shared with Thomas. Noah was still asleep beside her, his small chest rising and falling in the gray dawn light filtering through the loft window. Then it all came rushing back. The auction, Jack Mercer, the ride through the darkness to this cabin in the mountains. She sat up slowly, every muscle in her body aching. Below, the fire was burning low but steady. Jack must have kept it going all night. She could see his bedroll by the hearth neatly rolled and tied. The man himself was outside, and the rhythmic thunk of the axe told her he'd been up for a while. Clara climbed down the ladder as quietly as she could, not wanting to wake Noah. The morning air was cold, and she wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Through the small window she could see Jack in the yard, his back to the cabin, bringing the axe down in smooth, powerful strokes that split logs like they were made of butter. He'd taken off his shirt despite the chill. His back was lean and muscled, scarred in places. One scar ran from his left shoulder blade down to his ribs, long, vicious looking. A war wound, probably, or something worse. Clara looked away quickly, feeling like she'd intruded on something private. She moved to the fire, added a small log, then found the coffee pot. There was coffee in a tin on the shelf, and she set about making a pot the way Thomas had taught her, strong enough to stand a spoon in. The domestic normalcy of it felt strange. Yesterday she'd been sold like cattle. This morning she was making coffee in a stranger's cabin. The axe stopped. A minute later the door opened, and Jack came in carrying an armload of split wood. He'd put his shirt back on, though he hadn't bothered with the buttons. When he saw her, he stopped. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." "Habit." He carried the wood to the box by the fireplace, stacked it neatly. "Coffee smells good. It'll be ready in a minute." Clara busied herself with the pot, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough." Jack moved to the window, looking out at the mountains. The early light turned everything gold and purple. "We need to talk about what happens next." Clara's stomach tightened. Here it was, the moment when he'd tell her his real price, when she'd find out what he actually wanted from her. Men didn't spend $100 for nothing. "All right," she said quietly. Jack turned to face her. His expression was serious but not unkind. "Blackwood's going to come after you. Maybe not today, but soon. He'll claim some irregularity with the sale. Say I didn't have proper authorization or that you were sold under duress. He'll try to get you back under his control." Can he do that? Legally, no, but Blackwood doesn't always worry about legal. Jack's jaw tightened. He's got the sheriff in his pocket, half the town council too. He's been running Redemption Creek for 5 years, and he doesn't like being challenged. Clara poured coffee into 2 tin cups with shaking hands. "So what do I do? Where can I go?" "That's what we need to figure out." Jack took the cup she offered their fingers, brushing for a second. "You have family anywhere? Friends who'd take you in?" "No. Thomas and I came out here from Ohio 3 years ago. His parents are dead. Mine disowned me when I married him. They wanted me to marry the minister's son, not a soldier with no prospects." The old bitterness crept into her voice. "I have a sister in Philadelphia, but we haven't spoken in years. She made it clear I wasn't welcome." "What about money? Any savings Blackwood didn't steal?" Clara almost laughed. "Nothing. He took everything, even my wedding ring." She touched her bare finger unconsciously. "I have the clothes I'm wearing and the blanket Noah sleeps in. That's it." Jack was quiet for a moment, drinking his coffee, thinking. Clara studied him in the morning light. He couldn't be much older than 30, but there was something weathered about him, something that said he'd lived hard and survived harder. "I have a proposition," he said finally. "Here it comes," Clara thought. Her hands tightened around her cup. "Stay here," Jack continued, "for a while at least, until we figure out something better. You can help around the place, cooking, mending, whatever needs doing. I'll pay you a fair wage, enough to save up for a fresh start somewhere Blackwood can't reach." Clara stared at him. "That's it. You want me to work as your housekeeper?" "More like a partner. This place needs work. I'm not here half the time, got business that takes me away for days at a stretch. Someone needs to tend the chickens, keep the garden going, make sure the place doesn't fall apart." He met her eyes. "You'd be doing me a favor." "A favor?" Clara's voice was flat. "You spent $100 on me yesterday, and now I'd be doing you a favor." "Yes." "Mr. Mercer, Jack, I'm not stupid. Men don't spend that kind of money expecting nothing in return." Something flashed in Jack's eyes. Anger, maybe, or hurt. "I told you yesterday, Mrs. Hayes, I don't own you. You're free to leave any time you want. But if you walk out of here right now with no money and nowhere to go, what do you think happens? You make it maybe as far as the next town before you run out of food. Then what? You end up right back where you started, or worse." The truth of it hit her like cold water. He was right. She had nothing, no money, no prospects, no way to support herself and Noah. If she left now, she'd be desperate within a week, and desperate women ended up back on auction blocks or worse places. "How long?" she asked. "What? How long would I need to stay to earn enough to leave?" Jack's expression flickered. 3 months, maybe 4. I'd pay you $20 a month plus room and board. That'd give you enough to get to California or Oregon. Start fresh somewhere nobody knows your face. $20 a month. Clara's voice rose. That's more than some men make working mines. You'd be earning it, trust me. They stared at each other across the small cabin. The coffee pot hissed on the fire. Outside, a crow called harshly. There's something you're not telling me, Clara said finally. Nobody pays wages like that for housekeeping. What's the catch? Jack set down his cup, walked to the window again. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Blackwood isn't just angry about losing yesterday. He's afraid. Afraid that if one person stands up to him, others might too. That's why he'll come after you, to prove he's still in control, to prove that nobody crosses him without consequences. So I'm bait. No. Jack turned sharply. You're not bait. But your presence here in my home under my protection, it sends a message. It says I'm not afraid of him. And that makes me a target. It makes us both targets. Jack's voice was grim. I'm not going to lie to you, Mrs. Hayes. Staying here means you're in the middle of something bigger than just your freedom. Blackwood and I. There's history there. Bad history. Yesterday was just the latest chapter. Clara felt cold despite the warm coffee in her hands. What kind of history? The kind that ends with someone dead? Jack said it flatly. He killed a friend of mine 2 years ago, made it look like an accident. I couldn't prove it, but I know. And he knows I know. The silence stretched between them. Clara's mind raced. This wasn't just about helping her. This was about revenge, or justice, or whatever line existed between the two. You should have told me this yesterday, she said. Would it have changed anything? Would you have preferred I left you on that platform? No, but I deserved to know what I was walking into. You're right. Jack's shoulders sagged slightly. You did. I'm sorry. The apology surprised her. Clara had known a lot of men, her father, Thomas, the miners in town, and none of them apologized easily. The fact that Jack did it without hesitation, without making excuses, meant something. If I stay, she said slowly, I need your word on something. Name it. No matter what happens with Blackwood, you don't put Noah in danger. If things get bad, if he comes here with guns or the law or whatever, you let me take my son and go. You don't try to stop me. You don't use us as leverage. You just let us go. Jack looked at her for a long moment. You have my word. Say it, all of it. If things get dangerous, you take Noah and go. I won't stop you. I won't use you as leverage. You have my word on that, Mrs. Hayes. On my honor as a soldier and whatever decency I've got left. Clara searched his face, looking for lies, for the manipulation she'd learned to expect from men who wanted something. But all she saw was honesty. Hard, unflinching honesty. All right, she said, I'll stay for 3 months. But I want it in writing, a contract. So if something happens to you, I have proof I was working here legally. A ghost of a smile crossed Jack's face. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. I've had to be. I'll write it up today. We'll both sign it and I'll have it witnessed in town. Jack moved toward the door. I need to ride into Redemption Creek this morning. Sign Blackwood's papers, make everything official. You should stay here. Keep the door barred. Don't open it for anyone but me. Fear spiked through her. You're leaving. Just for a few hours, but Mrs. Hayes, Clara. He caught himself. While I'm gone, there's a rifle above the door and a pistol in the drawer by the bed. You know how to shoot. Thomas taught me. Good. Anyone comes around who isn't me, you don't answer. You don't talk to them. You just get Noah and that rifle, and you wait. Understand? Clara nodded, her throat tight. I'll be back before dark. There's food in the larder and the chickens need feeding around noon. They're in the coop behind the barn. Jack grabbed his jacket, his hat. At the door, he paused. Yesterday you asked me why I did it. Why I bought your freedom. You said you knew Thomas. That's part of it. But the whole truth. Jack's eyes met hers. I've seen what men like Blackwood do. I've seen them destroy good people for profit, and I got tired of watching. So when I heard what was happening to you, I decided to do something about it. Maybe that makes me a fool, but I can live with being a fool better than I can live with being a coward. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Clara stood there for a long time listening to the sound of his horse riding away. Then she went to the door, slid the heavy wooden bar into place, and checked the rifle like Jack had told her to. It was loaded. She climbed back up to the loft where Noah was starting to stir, picked him up, held him close, breathed in his baby smell of milk and sleep. What have I gotten us into? She whispered against his soft hair. Noah just gurgled and grabbed at her nose with his tiny fist. The morning passed slowly. Clara fed Noah, changed him, then explored the cabin more thoroughly. It was sparse but well maintained. Jack clearly didn't spend money on luxuries. The furniture was handmade but solid. The few dishes were tin, not china. There were books on a shelf. Shakespeare Whitman, a battered copy of Don Quixote, which surprised her. She hadn't pegged Jack as a reading man. In the larder, she found flour salt beans, dried meat coffee. Enough supplies to last weeks. Either Jack stocked up heavily, or he'd prepared for her arrival more than he'd let on. Around noon, she wrapped Noah in his blanket and ventured outside to feed the chickens. The air was crisp and clean, scented with pine. The mountains rose up on all sides, their peaks still dusted with last winter's snow. It was beautiful, isolated, the kind of place you could disappear and never be found. The kind of place where no one would hear you scream. Clara shook off the dark thought. Jack had given her no reason to fear him. If anything, he'd been almost too careful with her, too respectful, like she was made of glass and might shatter if he moved too quickly. The chickens came running when she scattered feed, clucking and pecking at the ground. There were 8 of them, fat and healthy. She checked the nesting boxes and found 4 eggs still warm. The simple pleasure of it, this normal domestic task, made her throat tight. This could be a life, a real life. Not the desperate survival of the last 3 months, but something stable, safe. If she could trust Jack Mercer, if Blackwood didn't come for her, if. She was heading back to the cabin when she heard horses. Clara froze. Jack had said he wouldn't be back until dark, and that was definitely more than 1 horse. She could hear men's voices, low and rough. Her heart hammered. She clutched Noah closer and ran for the cabin, moving as fast as she dared. Got inside, slammed the door, dropped the bar into place with shaking hands. The voices got louder, closer. Clara grabbed the rifle from above the door. Her hands were slick with sweat. She'd shot cans with Thomas, but she'd never aimed at a person. Could she do it if it came down to protecting Noah? Could she actually pull the trigger? A fist pounded on the door. "Mrs. Hayes, we know you're in there. Open up." She didn't recognize the voice. Definitely not Jack. She said nothing, just backed toward the ladder, rifle raised. "This is Sheriff Coleman. I need to speak with you. It's official business regarding yesterday's auction." The sheriff, Blackwood's man. Clara's blood ran cold. "I'm not opening this door," she called out, hating how her voice shook. "Come back when Mr. Mercer is here." "Can't do that, ma'am. Got a court order here, says you were sold under fraudulent circumstances. Says Jack Mercer didn't have proper legal standing to make that purchase. I'm here to take you back into custody until this gets sorted." "That's a lie. It's right here in black and white. Now you can open this door peacefully, or I can break it down. Your choice." Clara's mind raced. The door was solid, but it wouldn't hold against determined men. The windows were too small to climb through with Noah. She was trapped. "I have a rifle," she said, "and I know how to use it. You break down that door, someone's getting shot." Silence. Then a different voice, smooth and familiar. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Samuel Blackwood. Please, let's be reasonable about this." Of course, Blackwood had come himself. "There's nothing to be reasonable about," Clara shouted. "The sale was legal. Jack Mercer paid you in gold. You accepted it in front of 50 witnesses. And upon further review, I've discovered irregularities. Mr. Mercer failed to provide proper identification. The payment, while generous, doesn't meet the full extent of your late husband's debts. And there are questions about whether he has the legal right to, shall we say, purchase a human being." Blackwood's voice dripped false sympathy. "You see my dilemma. Your dilemma is you got outplayed yesterday, and now you want revenge." She heard Blackwood's sharp intake of breath. "I would be very careful about making accusations, Mrs. Hayes, especially when you're alone in that cabin with no one to help you." The threat was clear. Clara looked down at Noah in her arms, then at the rifle. She couldn't fight them all, and if shooting started, Noah could be hurt. "What do you want?" she asked. "Simply to rectify yesterday's mistake. Come back to town. We'll conduct a proper auction with proper documentation, everything legal and above board. So you can sell me to the highest bidder again, so you can separate me from my son. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that suits everyone." Blackwood's voice was oily. You're being unreasonable, Mrs. Hayes. Mr. Mercer has clearly filled your head with nonsense about my intentions. I'm simply trying to settle your husband's debts in accordance with the law." Clara's hands tightened on the rifle. She was out of options. She couldn't shoot the sheriff even if he was crooked, and she couldn't fight off multiple men with a baby in her arms. She was about to lower the rifle, about to surrender, when a new sound cut through the morning. Hoof beats, coming fast. "Well now," Blackwood said, "looks like Mr. Mercer is returning early. This should be interesting." Clara's heart leaped. Through the window she saw Jack riding hard up the trail, his horse lathered with sweat. He must have pushed it to its limits. How had he known? He pulled up short when he saw the sheriff's horses, took in the situation in one glance. Then he dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate. "Sheriff," he said calmly, "Blackwood. Didn't expect to see you boys out this way." "Just doing my job, Mercer." The sheriff was a big man with a badge that looked too shiny, to be honest. "Got a court order here regarding that purchase you made yesterday." "Court order?" Jack's voice was flat. "From Judge Morrison. Judge Morrison's out of town. This comes from Judge Harding over in Silver Creek. Silver Creek's in the next county. Harding's got no jurisdiction here. He does when it concerns matters of territorial law." Jack's jaw tightened. Clara could see the calculation in his eyes. He was outnumbered, her count through the window showed 4 men total, including Blackwood, all armed. "What's this order say exactly?" Jack asked. Blackwood stepped forward, pulling a paper from his coat. "It says the auction was conducted improperly, that you failed to establish legal standing, and that Mrs. Hayes needs to be returned to proper custody until the matter is resolved." "Proper custody meaning you?" "Meaning the court. The court you paid off." Jack's voice was quiet, dangerous. The sheriff's hand moved toward his gun. "That's a serious accusation, Mercer." "It's the truth. Everyone in 3 counties knows Harding's been in Blackwood's pocket for years. This isn't a court order, it's a kidnapping with legal decoration." "You calling me a liar?" The sheriff's face flushed red. "I'm calling it what it is." Jack took a step forward. "Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back on your horses. You're going to ride back to town. And you're going to tell Judge Harding that if he wants to challenge my purchase, he can do it properly, through the territorial court, with real jurisdiction." "Or what?" Blackwood sneered. "You'll fight all 4 of us. I know you're good, Mercer, but you're not that good." "Maybe not." Jack's hand rested casually near his gun. "But I'll take at least 2 of you with me. Question is which 2 sheriff you want to be first. Or maybe you, Blackwood, seems like you're the one who started this." The tension was thick enough to cut. Clara could barely breathe. Through the window she watched the men size each other up. The sheriff's deputies were young, nervous. They didn't want a gunfight. "This isn't over, Mercer," Blackwood said finally. "Not by a long shot." "No," Jack agreed. "It's not, but it's over for today. Now get off my land." For a long moment nobody moved. Then the sheriff made a disgusted sound and turned toward his horse. "Come on, we'll settle this proper-like, through the courts." "You do that," Jack said. Clara watched them mount up and ride away, watched until they disappeared down the trail and the sound of hooves faded to nothing. Only then did she lower the rifle with shaking hands and unbolt the door. Jack was still standing in the yard watching the trail. He didn't turn when she came out. "How did you know?" she asked. "Town's full of people who don't like Blackwood. One of them rode out to warn me. Told me the sheriff was heading this way with a fake order." Jack finally turned to look at her. "You all right?" "I'm fine, scared but fine." Clara looked down at Noah, who'd somehow slept through the whole thing. "You were right. He came for us. And he'll come again." Jack's voice was grim. "That's why we need to be ready. I'll hire some men I trust to keep watch on the place when I'm not here, and I'll teach you to shoot better than just hitting cans." "Jack, this is insane. Maybe I should just go, leave Montana altogether, take Noah somewhere. Blackwood can't find us." "On what money? With what help?" Jack shook his head. "No." You run now, you'll be running forever. Better to stand and fight. But you said yourself. I said this was dangerous. I didn't say it was impossible. Jack's eyes were fierce. You've got rights, Clara, legal rights. And you've got me standing beside you. That counts for something. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways this could go wrong, but there was something in Jack's face that stopped her. Determination, conviction, and underneath it all, something that looked almost like hope. All right, she said quietly. We stand and fight. But Jack, if it comes down to it, if they come with more men or real legal papers. I remember my promise. You and Noah come first, always. He reached out like he might touch her shoulder, then seemed to think better of it. His hand dropped. Come on, let's get you both back inside. I need to check the perimeter, make sure they actually left. They walked back to the cabin together, and despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty and danger, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The next 2 weeks passed in a rhythm Clara hadn't expected. Jack was true to his word. He hired 2 men from a neighboring ranch to keep watch on the property during the day while he handled business in town or worked the far pastures. One was an older man named Pete with a weathered face and kind eyes. The other was younger, barely 20, called simply Kid, though his real name was William something or other that nobody used. They were respectful, kept their distance, but Clara knew they were there, watching, and it should have made her feel safer. Instead, it reminded her every day that she was living in the middle of a war she hadn't chosen. Jack taught her to shoot properly, not cans on a fence post, but real shooting. How to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling it, how to reload fast with shaking hands. He set up targets behind the barn and made her practice until her shoulder ached from the rifle's kick. Again, he'd say when she missed, not harsh, just firm. You're jerking the barrel, smooth motion, like you're reaching for something gentle. I'm shooting a gun, not picking flowers. Same principle. Respect the tool, control your body, hit what you're aiming at. By the end of the first week, she could hit the center of the target 3 times out of 5. By the end of the second week, she barely missed at all. You're a natural, Jack said one afternoon, watching her reload without fumbling. Thomas teach you the basics. He tried. I wasn't very good back then. Clara set the rifle down, rubbed her sore shoulder. Guess I'm more motivated now. Fear's a good teacher. Is that what the war taught you? Jack's face went still. For a moment, Clara thought she'd crossed a line. Then he picked up the rifle, checked the sight, set it back down carefully. The war taught me that good men die for bad reasons, he said quietly, and that sometimes the only choice you have is whether to die standing or kneeling. I chose standing. He walked away before she could respond, heading toward the barn, with that long, easy stride that ate up ground without seeming to hurry. Clara watched him go, Noah balanced on her hip, and wondered what ghosts Jack Mercer carried behind those dark eyes. That night she cooked supper venison stew with the last of the potatoes from the root cellar. Jack had brought back supplies from town, including flour and sugar and a bag of peppermint sticks that he'd handed to her awkwardly, like he wasn't sure if it was appropriate. For the boy, he'd said, when he's older, my ma used to give us peppermints on Sundays. It was the first personal thing he'd shared that wasn't about the war or Thomas, and Clara had taken the bag with a quiet thank you, tucking it away in the cupboard where the mice couldn't get it. Now they sat at the table eating in the comfortable silence they'd developed. Jack had stopped sleeping by the fire after the first few nights. Instead, he'd moved his bedroll to the barn, saying it was warmer there and he needed to be close to the horses anyway. Clara suspected it was more about propriety, about making sure nobody could say anything improper was happening under his roof. I saw Mary Sutton in town today, Jack said, breaking the silence. She asked about you. Clara looked up. Mary, I didn't think she'd want anything to do with me after the auction. She feels guilty. Said she wanted to speak up that day, but her husband wouldn't let her. She asked if you needed anything. Women's things. Heat crept up Clara's neck. That's kind of her. I told her you were managing fine, but if you wanted to write her a list, I could pick up supplies next time I'm in town. Jack focused on his stew like it required his full attention. Or if you wanted to visit her yourself. She lives on the edge of town. You could go without running into Blackwood. I'm not ready for that yet, for people staring and whispering. They're not all like that. Some folks are angry about what happened. There's talk of bringing in a territorial marshal to investigate Blackwood's business dealings. Clara's pulse quickened. Really, could that work? Maybe, if enough people are willing to testify. Jack's jaw tightened. Problem is, most folks who've been hurt by Blackwood are either too scared or too far gone to come back, and the ones still in town don't want to risk their livelihoods by making him angry. What about the man you mentioned, your friend who died? Jack was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. His name was Daniel Carter, Danny. We served together, came west together after the war. He started a small freight business running goods between here and Helena. Did well, too. Then Blackwood decided he wanted a piece of it, offered to buy Danny out for a fraction of what it was worth. Danny refused. Clara waited outside. The wind picked up, rattling the shutters. 2 weeks later, Danny's wagon went off a cliff on the mountain road. Sheriff said the wheel broke. Accident. Jack's knuckles were white around his spoon. But I checked that wagon before Danny left. I checked it myself, and those wheels were solid. Somebody tampered with it. Somebody wanted Danny dead. And you think it was Blackwood? I know it was. Danny told me the day before that Blackwood had threatened him, said if he didn't sell, he might have an accident. I told Danny to be careful, to watch his back. Jack's voice cracked. I should have done more, should have ridden with him that day, should have. You can't blame yourself for what someone else did. Can't I? Jack looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was raw. He was my friend, my responsibility, and I let him down. Clara reached across the table without thinking, put her hand over Jack's. His skin was warm, calloused from work. He stared at their joined hands like he didn't know what to do with the contact. You're not letting me down, she said quietly. You're keeping me and Noah safe. You're standing up to Blackwood when nobody else will. That counts for something. Jack turned his hand over, squeezed her fingers gently, just for a moment. Then he pulled away and stood abruptly. I should check on the horses, he said. Thanks for supper. He was out the door before Clara could respond. She sat there staring at her hand, still feeling the warmth of his touch. Something had shifted between them just then, something neither of them was ready to name. She cleaned up the dishes, checked on Noah, who was sleeping peacefully in his cradle. Another thing Jack had made carved from pine with surprising skill, and tried not to think about the way her heart had skipped when Jack had held her hand. She was a widow, recently widowed. She had no business feeling anything for any man, least of all the one who'd saved her from an auction block. It was gratitude, she told herself. Simple gratitude and nothing more. But when she climbed into bed that night, she dreamed of dark eyes and gentle hands, and woke feeling guilty and confused. 3 days later, Mary Sutton came to visit. Clara heard the wagon before she saw it, and her first instinct was to grab the rifle. But Pete was out front, and he called out that it was all right, just Mrs. Sutton from town. Mary was a plump woman in her 40s with graying hair and a warm smile. She climbed down from the wagon with a basket over her arm and came to the door like she'd been invited. I hope you don't mind, she said. I brought some things I thought you might need. Fabric thread, some jars for preserving, and I made bread this morning. Clara stepped back to let her in, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of it. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. What happened to you was wrong, Clara. May I call you Clara? At Clara's nod, Mary continued, I've been sick about it, sick that I didn't speak up. My husband said it wasn't our business, but it was our business. It's everyone's business when a woman and child are being treated like property. She set the basket on the table and started unpacking it. Fabric in soft colors, a card of needles, thread in a dozen shades, 2 jars of strawberry preserves, a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth that smelled like heaven. "There's more in the wagon," Mary said. "Some of my daughter's old baby clothes. She's grown now, married with her own little ones, but I saved everything. No sense letting it go to waste when your boy could use it." Clara's throat went tight. "I can't accept all this." "Why not?" "Because I can't pay you back." Mary stopped unpacking, turned to look at Clara with eyes that had seen their share of hardship. "Honey, this isn't about payment. This is about women helping women. God knows we need to stick together in this hard country." That broke something in Clara. She sat down hard in one of the chairs and started crying. Not quiet tears, but great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep. Mary was beside her in an instant, arms around her, making soothing sounds. "There now," she murmured. "Let it out. You've been holding it together too long." "I'm sorry," Clara gasped. "I don't know why I'm—" "Hush. You've earned the right to cry. What you've been through, losing your husband, that awful auction, living out here in the middle of nowhere with a man you barely know, it's enough to break anyone. Jack's been good to me, respectful. I'm sure he has. Jack Mercer's a good man, even if he is too stubborn for his own good." Mary pulled back, dug a handkerchief from her sleeve, handed it to Clara. "But that doesn't make this easy. None of this is easy." Clara wiped her eyes, blew her nose, felt embarrassed and relieved all at once. "I keep thinking I should feel grateful. I'm alive, Noah's safe, we have shelter and food. But instead, I just feel angry all the time. At Blackwood, at everyone, at Thomas for dying and leaving me alone, at my parents for disowning me, at the people who stood and watched that auction happen, at God for letting any of it happen in the first place." Clara's voice rose. "Is that terrible? Am I terrible for feeling that way?" "No, honey, you're human." Mary sat down across from her, folded her hands on the table. "Anger's just grief in different clothes. You're entitled to both." They sat there for a while, the silence broken only by Noah's soft breathing from his cradle. Finally, Clara asked the question that had been eating at her. "What are people in town saying about me being here with Jack?" Mary hesitated. "You want the truth, always. Some people are saying improper things, that you're his mistress, that the whole auction was staged so he could buy himself a woman without anyone questioning it." Mary held up a hand when Clara started to protest. "I don't believe a word of it, and neither do the good folks in town, but you know how people talk. So my reputation is ruined." "Your reputation was already in question the moment you stood on that auction block, fair or not. At least now you're safe and cared for. That's what matters." Clara thought about the contract Jack had written up, signed and witnessed by Pete and Kid, about the wages he paid her every week in cash that she saved in a tin under the floorboard, about the careful distance he maintained, never touching her except by accident, never looking at her longer than necessary. "Nothing improper is happening here," she said firmly. "I believe you, but Clara, you should know Jack has feelings for you." Clara's heart stopped. "What? No, he's just honoring a debt to Thomas." "Maybe that's how it started, but I've known Jack Mercer for 3 years, and I've never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you, like you're something precious he's afraid to break." "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Mary's smile was gentle. "I saw you two in town last week when he came to get supplies. The way he positioned himself between you and everyone else. The way he kept checking to make sure you were all right. That's not duty, honey. That's care." Clara shook her head. "Even if that were true, I can't. I lost Thomas 3 months ago. I can't think about another man. It's too soon. It's wrong. There's no timeline on grief, Clara, and there's no rule that says you can't feel things for someone new. Your heart's not betraying Thomas by staying alive, isn't it?" Mary reached across the table, squeezed Clara's hand. "Thomas wouldn't want you to stop living. He'd want you and that beautiful boy to be happy and safe. And if Jack Mercer can give you that, if he makes you feel something good in the middle of all this darkness, then maybe you should let yourself feel it." Clara pulled her hand away. "You're assuming I feel anything at all." "Don't you?" The question hung in the air. Clara couldn't answer it, wouldn't answer it, because the truth was terrifying. She did feel something, had been feeling it for days now, the way her pulse jumped when Jack came in from the barn, the way she listened for his footsteps, the way she caught herself watching him when he didn't know she was looking. "I should check on Noah," she said, standing abruptly. Mary didn't push. She just smiled and started unpacking the rest of the basket. "I'll leave these things here for you. And Clara, I'm here if you need to talk. About anything. You're not alone in this." After Mary left, Clara sat with the baby clothes spread out on the table. Tiny shirts and gowns carefully mended and lovingly saved. She held one up to the light, soft cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar. Someone had put hours into this little garment, had dressed their baby in it, watched them grow out of it, packed it away with hope that someday it might be needed again. That night, Jack came in from the barn later than usual. Clara had kept his supper warm by the fire. He ate quietly, looking tired, and she noticed a bruise forming on his jaw. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing, just a disagreement with a fence post." "Fence posts don't usually fight back." Jack's mouth twitched. This one did. Clara knew he was lying, knew it had probably been a disagreement with a person, not a fence post. But she didn't push. They'd developed this pattern, not quite friends, not quite employer and employee, something in between that didn't have a name. "Mary Sutton came by today," she said instead. "I heard. Pete mentioned it. She brought baby clothes and supplies." Clara poured him more coffee. "She's a good woman." "She is. She also said people in town are talking about us." Jack's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. He set down his fork carefully. "What kind of talk?" "The kind you'd expect, that we're living in sin, that the auction was fake, that I'm your mistress." "That's—" Jack's jaw clenched. "That's not true, none of it." "I know that, but they don't care about the truth. They care about appearances." "Then maybe we need to change the appearance." Clara's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Jack stood, paced to the window, stared out at the darkness. When he turned back, his face was set, determined. "Marry me," he said. The world tilted. Clara gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "What? Marry me, make it legal and proper. That'll shut people up." "Jack, that's insane. We barely know each other." "We know enough. You need protection and a name that's not attached to Blackwood's debt. I need—" He stopped, started again. "I need help with this place. A partnership. It makes sense." "A partnership." Clara's voice sounded strange to her own ears. "That's what you're calling it. What else would you call it? I don't know. Maybe ask me how I feel instead of telling me what makes sense." Jack looked stricken. "I didn't mean Clara. I'm not trying to trap you into anything. If you don't want to, we'll find another way. I just thought—" "You thought you'd solve the problem like you solve everything else. Make a plan, execute it, move on. That's not fair, isn't it?" Clara stood angry now, angry at him, at herself, at the whole impossible situation. "You bought me off an auction block. You brought me here. You're paying me wages and teaching me to shoot and protecting me from Blackwood. And now you want to marry me because it's convenient." "Not because it's convenient, because—" Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Because I can't stand the thought of you being hurt again. Because every time I ride away from this cabin, I'm terrified I'll come back and find you gone. Because when I see you with Noah, when you smile at something he does, He stopped, closed his eyes, took a breath. "Because I care about you," he said quietly. "More than I should, more than I planned to, and I know it's too soon, and you're still grieving Thomas, and I've got no right to ask, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. So yes, Clara, I'm asking you to marry me, not because it's convenient, because I want to, because I think maybe if you gave it a chance, you might want to as well." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She could hear the fire crackling, could hear Noah stirring in his sleep, could hear the blood rushing in her ears. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Say you'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. Just think about it. Clara looked at this man who'd saved her life, who'd given her shelter and safety and something that might have been the beginning of hope, who was looking at her now like she held his entire future in her hands. "All right," she said. "I'll think about it." Jack nodded. Relief and fear and something else flickered across his face. "Thank you." He left, then headed back to the barn, and Clara sank into her chair with shaking legs. She should say no, should tell him it was impossible, that she was still Thomas's wife in her heart, that she couldn't think about remarrying when she'd barely begun to grieve. But Mary's words echoed in her head. Your heart's not betraying Thomas by staying alive. And underneath all the logical reasons to refuse, there was a small, quiet truth she'd been trying to ignore. When Jack had said he cared about her, her first feeling hadn't been shock or horror. It had been relief. Clara put her head in her hands and tried to figure out what that meant, tried to untangle duty from desire, gratitude from something deeper, tried to imagine a future where she was Clara Mercer instead of Clara Hayes, where she built a life with this quiet, wounded man who read poetry and chopped wood and looked at her like she mattered. Tried to imagine it and found that she could. That was the most terrifying part of all. Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in the loft with Noah breathing softly beside her, staring at the rough timber ceiling, turning Jack's proposal over and over in her mind like a stone she couldn't put down. Marriage. The word felt impossible and inevitable all at once. She thought about Thomas, about their wedding day in that little church in Ohio, her parents refusing to attend because they deemed him unsuitable, about the way he'd looked at her when she'd walked down the aisle in her mother's old dress altered to fit, about the promises they'd made till death do us part. Death had parted them. 3 months ago, in a mine that had collapsed like Thomas's dreams of making something of himself out west. She'd loved him, still loved him, but he was gone and she was here, and there was a man in the barn who'd asked her to build a new life with him. Was that betrayal or survival? Clara didn't know, wasn't sure she'd ever know. When dawn came, she climbed down the ladder with gritty eyes and made coffee from habit more than desire. Jack came in from his morning chores looking as tired as she felt. They moved around each other carefully, not quite meeting each other's eyes. "I'm riding into town," he said finally. "Need to pick up some lumber for the fence repairs. You need anything?" "No, thank you." Jack nodded, hesitated at the door. "Clara, about last night. I'm still thinking." "Right, of course." He grabbed his hat, twisted it in his hands. "Take all the time you need." After he left, Clara fed Noah and then stood at the window watching dust settle on the empty trail. Pete was out by the barn mending tack. Kid was somewhere in the south pasture checking fence lines. She was alone with her thoughts, which was both a blessing and a curse. She tried to imagine saying yes, tried to picture herself as Jack's wife living in this cabin, permanently raising Noah here in the shadow of these mountains. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but then nothing had been the life she'd planned since Thomas died. She tried to imagine saying no, tried to picture herself leaving in 3 months with her saved wages, heading to some other town where nobody knew her face, starting over alone with a baby, looking for work, looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life, wondering if Blackwood would find her. Neither option felt right. Neither felt safe. Around noon, she heard a wagon. Clara's hand went automatically to the rifle, but it was just Mary Sutton again, this time with another woman Clara didn't recognize. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," Mary called out. "This is my friend Elizabeth Chen. Her husband runs the general store. We thought you might like some company." Elizabeth was a small Chinese woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She climbed down from the wagon carrying a basket and came straight to Clara. "Mary tells me you're a widow with a baby," she said. Her English was accented but clear. "So am I. My husband died 2 years ago. I married Robert 6 months later. People talked then, too." Clara blinked at the directness. Mary laughed. "Elizabeth doesn't believe in wasting time," she explained. She heard about Jack's proposal. How did you? Clara looked at Mary. Did he tell you? He didn't have to. Jack came into town this morning looking like a man who'd just jumped off a cliff and wasn't sure if he'd land or fall. I've known him long enough to recognize that look. Mary settled herself at the table uninvited, clearly planning to stay. So, are you going to accept? I don't know, that's why I'm thinking about it. What's to think about? Elizabeth set down her basket and started unpacking tea things. He's a good man. He has land. He's not cruel. You need security. He needs a wife. It's simple. It's not simple. I loved my husband. I loved mine too. Elizabeth's voice softened slightly. But love doesn't keep you warm when winter comes. Love doesn't put food in your child's mouth. Practical matters sometimes. So I should marry him for practical reasons. You should marry him because he asked, and you're still here thinking about it instead of laughing in his face. Elizabeth poured hot water over tea leaves with practiced efficiency. If answer was no, you would have said no already. But you didn't. Which means you want to say yes, but you're afraid. Clara sat down heavily. Of course I'm afraid. What if it's wrong? What if I regret it? What if you don't? Mary interrupted gently. What if it's exactly right and you miss it because you're too scared to try? I barely know him. You know enough. You know he saved you. You know he keeps his word. You know he's gentle with you and the baby. Mary reached across the table. And unless I'm very wrong, you know that when he looks at you, your heart does something it hasn't done since Thomas died. Clara's face heated. That's not, I don't. It's all right to feel things, Elizabeth said. Heart doesn't stop working just because person dies. Would be easier if it did, but it doesn't. Thomas has only been gone 3 months. And you think he'd want you to spend rest of your life alone? Elizabeth's dark eyes were knowing. My first husband, his name was Way. He made me promise before he died. Made me promise not to stay alone. Said I was too young to wear black forever. I was angry at him for asking, but he was right. Clara's throat tightened. Thomas didn't get to make me promise anything. He just left for work one morning and never came home. Then promise yourself, Mary said quietly. Promise yourself that you'll survive this, that you'll build a life worth living, that you'll give Noah a chance at something better than grief and running. The words hit Clara like a physical blow, because that's what she'd been doing, wasn't it, running? Even here in Jack's cabin, she'd been mentally running, planning her escape in 3 months, refusing to put down roots or admit that maybe she wanted to stay. I'm scared, she whispered. Of course you are, Mary said, but you're also strong. Strong enough to stand on that auction block and protect your baby. Strong enough to learn to shoot and keep going when most women would have broken. You're strong enough for this too. Elizabeth poured tea into 3 cups. I tell you what my mother told me. Fear is like shadow. It only exists because there's light somewhere. You're afraid because you see possibility. Because part of you wants this. Listen to that part. Clara wrapped her hands around the warm cup. The tea smelled like jasmine and something else she couldn't name. What if he doesn't really love me? What if it's just duty? Does it matter? Elizabeth asked. Of course it matters. Why, love can grow. Respect and kindness, those are soil. Love is flower that comes after. My Robert, I didn't love him when we married, but I respected him. I liked him. Now, she smiled, now I love him very much. But it took time. And Jack, Mary asked gently, do you respect him like him? Clara thought about Jack teaching her to shoot with infinite patience. About him building Noah a cradle when he had 100 other things to do. About the careful way he always asked permission before entering a room where she was giving her space and dignity when most men wouldn't have bothered. Yes, she admitted, I do. Then maybe that's enough to start with. After the women left, Clara sat at the table for a long time. Noah was napping and the cabin was quiet except for the tick of the clock Jack had brought from town last week. She thought about everything they'd said, thought about fear and shadows and light, thought about the fact that when she tried to imagine leaving, her chest ached. She was still sitting there when Jack came home near sunset. He had lumber strapped to the wagon and was covered in sawdust. He saw her through the window, and his step faltered like he was bracing for bad news. Clara met him at the door before he could unhitch the wagon. "Yes," she said. Jack froze. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you, if the offer still stands." For a moment he just stared at her. Then something like wonder crossed his face. "It stands. It'll always stand. I have conditions. Name them." "I want time. I'm not ready for—" She felt her face heat. "For everything that marriage usually means. Not yet." "I understand. We'll take it at your pace, however long you need. And if it doesn't work, if we find we can't make it work, I want your word you will let me go. You won't try to keep me against my will." Something flickered in Jack's eyes. Pain, maybe, but he nodded. "You have my word, though I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it does work." "I know you will." Clara twisted her hands together. When what? When do you want to do this?" Jack thought for a moment. "End of the week. That gives us time to get the license, find a minister, unless you want something bigger with more people." "No, small is fine, just us and whoever needs to witness it. Pete and Kid can witness, or Mary and Elizabeth if you'd rather have women there." "Mary and Elizabeth," Clara decided. "They've been kind to me. I'd like them there." Jack nodded slowly. "End of the week then. Saturday." Saturday. They stood there awkwardly, neither quite sure what to do now that the decision was made. Finally, Jack cleared his throat. "I should tend to the horses, and I should start supper," but neither of them moved. They just looked at each other in the fading light, two people about to tie their lives together with barely a month's acquaintance, both scared and hopeful and trying not to show it. "Clara," Jack said quietly, "I know this isn't how you imagined your life going. I know I'm not easy. I've got ghosts and a temper, and I'm gone too much. But I swear to you, I will do everything I can to make you happy, to give you and Noah a good life. That's my promise." Clara's eyes stung. "I'll do the same. I may not love you yet, Jack, but I think I could, given time." "Time we have," he smiled, small and real. "We've got all the time in the world." That night, Clara wrote a letter to her sister in Philadelphia. She hadn't written in 3 years, hadn't spoken to her since the week before she'd married Thomas. But something in her needed to reach out to tell someone from her old life that she was still alive, still fighting. The words came slowly. "Dear Margaret, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll care, but I wanted you to know that I'm getting married again. Thomas died 3 months ago in a mining accident. I won't burden you with the details of what happened after you made it clear you wanted nothing to do with my choices. But I'm writing to tell you that I survived, that I'm rebuilding, that I found a good man who's willing to help me make a life out here in Montana. His name is Jack Mercer. He's a rancher. He's kind to me and to Noah. I think you'd like him, though I suppose I'll never know. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I just wanted someone from my family to know that I'm all right. That no matter what you or mother or father thought, I'm making something of myself out here. I'm stronger than any of you gave me credit for. I hope you're well. I hope your children are healthy. I hope you found happiness in the life you chose the same way I'm trying to find it in mine. Your sister Clara." She folded the letter, sealed it, and set it aside to mail the next time Jack went to town. She'd probably never get a response. Margaret had made her feelings clear years ago, but it didn't matter. The letter wasn't really for Margaret anyway. It was for Clara herself. Proof that she was moving forward, that she wasn't the same frightened girl who'd defied her parents to marry a soldier. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Mary came by with a dress, simple blue calico, but clean and new and prettier than anything Clara had owned in months. Elizabeth brought food for a small wedding supper. Jack cleaned the cabin from top to bottom, fixed every squeaky board, even picked wildflowers and put them in a jar on the table. You didn't have to do all this, Clara said, looking around at his handiwork. Wanted you to know I'm taking this seriously. I never thought you weren't. Good. Jack hesitated. I got you something. It's not much, but... He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, simple gold, slightly worn. Clara recognized it immediately. This was your mother's, she said. You told me about it when you mentioned the peppermint sticks. She'd want you to have it. She always said a ring was a circle, no beginning, no end, like a promise that lasts forever. Clara took the ring out, held it up to the light. It was beautiful in its simplicity. Tell me about her. Ma. Jack's face softened. She was tough, had to be raising 4 boys after Pa died, but she was gentle too. Always knew when one of us was hurting, even when we tried to hide it. She'd have liked you. How do you know? Because you're like her, strong and soft at the same time, willing to do what needs doing but still kind about it. He took the ring gently from her fingers, held it without putting it on. She died right before the war, pneumonia. I was 18. Sometimes I still hear her voice telling me to stand up straight or wash behind my ears. Clara smiled. She sounds wonderful. She was. Jack set the ring carefully back in the box. You don't have to wear it if you don't want to. I know you had your own ring from Thomas. Blackwood took it, said it counted toward the debt. The old anger flared. I'd be honored to wear your mother's ring, Jack. Saturday dawned clear and cold. Clara woke early, nerves making her stomach flip. This was her wedding day, again. She'd thought she'd only have one of these in her life, and now here she was, about to marry a man she'd known for less than a month. She fed Noah, bathed him in the wash basin, dressed him in one of the little gowns Mary had brought. He babbled happily, unaware that his mother's entire life was about to change. Mary and Elizabeth arrived mid-morning with enough food to feed an army. They helped Clara dress, pinned up her hair, even added a few wildflowers to make it special. You look beautiful, Mary said. Clara looked at herself in the small mirror Jack had hung by the door. She didn't feel beautiful. She felt terrified. But the woman looking back at her was stronger than the one who'd stood on that auction block. That had to count for something. Jack was waiting outside when she emerged. He'd borrowed a proper suit from somewhere. It was a little tight in the shoulders, a little short in the arms, but he'd made the effort. His hair was slicked back, his jaw freshly shaved. When he saw Clara, he went completely still. You look... His voice caught. You look lovely. So do you. The minister was a circuit preacher named Reverend Walsh, who happened to be passing through. Pete had flagged him down on the road and convinced him to perform the ceremony. He was an older man with kind eyes and a voice that had married hundreds of couples. They stood together in front of the cabin with the mountains rising behind them. Mary and Elizabeth stood to one side holding Noah. Pete and Kid stood on the other, hats in their hands. Dearly beloved, Reverend Walsh began, and Clara felt Jack's hand find hers. His palm was sweaty. He was nervous too. Somehow that made her feel better. The words washed over her. Love, honor, cherish, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. She'd said these words before to Thomas and meant every one. Now she was saying them again to a man who was still mostly a stranger and trying to mean them just as much. Do you, Jack Mercer, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Jack's voice was steady. And do you, Clara Hayes, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara looked at Jack, really looked at him, saw the hope and fear in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he was holding her hand, like she might disappear if he let go. She thought about everything that had brought her here, Thomas's death, the auction, the terror and uncertainty of the last months. Thought about the choice in front of her, safety or solitude, partnership, or loneliness, hope or fear. I do, she said. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. Jack, you may kiss your bride. Jack leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Clara didn't pull away. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was gentle and chaste, and somehow more meaningful than any grand gesture could have been. When they pulled apart, Mary was crying, Elizabeth was smiling, Pete and Kid were clapping, and Noah let out a shriek of baby laughter that made everyone laugh too. "Congratulations," Reverend Walsh said, shaking both their hands. "May God bless your union." They had a simple dinner, the food Mary and Elizabeth had brought, plus a cake that was lopsided but delicious. Jack barely ate, too busy watching Clara like he was afraid she might change her mind. Clara picked at her food, too nervous to have much appetite. When the sun started to set, the guests made their excuses and left. Even Pete and Kid headed back to their own places, giving the newlyweds privacy. Suddenly, Clara and Jack were alone, husband and wife, with no idea what to do next. "I'll sleep in the barn," Jack said immediately. "Like always, until you're ready for otherwise." "Thank you." Clara felt relief and something else she couldn't name. Disappointment, maybe. No, that was ridiculous. "Jack, I know this is strange. I know we're married now, but not really married. I'm sorry if that's—" "Don't apologize. We agreed on terms. I'm not going to pressure you." "I know you won't. That's one of the reasons I said yes." Jack smiled, small and sad. "Get some rest, Clara. It's been a long day." He was halfway to the door when Clara spoke. "Jack." He turned. "Thank you for this, for everything. You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You gave me my life back. That's worth more than all the gold in the world." Jack's expression softened. "You gave me something too, a reason to keep this place going, a reason to come home, so I guess we're even." After he left, Clara got ready for bed in a daze. She was married. Clara Mercer now, not Clara Hayes. She climbed into the loft, lay down beside Noah, and stared at the ring on her finger, Jack's mother's ring, now hers. She'd done it, made the choice, jumped off the cliff like Mary said. Now she just had to hope she'd land instead of fall. Outside, Jack lay in the barn staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. He was married. To a woman who'd agreed to it out of desperation more than desire, who was still in love with her dead husband, who'd made it very clear she wasn't ready for anything beyond a business arrangement. But she'd said yes. She'd stood there in that blue dress, with flowers in her hair, and promised to be his wife. And for a moment, just a moment, when he'd kissed her, he'd felt her respond. Just the smallest movement, barely there, but real. That was enough. It had to be enough. Jack closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tried not to think about Clara in the cabin, wearing his ring, sleeping in his bed, but not with him. Time, he reminded himself. They had time. He just hoped it would be enough to turn this careful arrangement into something real. The first week of marriage was the strangest of Clara's life. She woke each morning as Mrs. Mercer made breakfast for her husband, kept house like any proper wife would. But when night came, Jack disappeared to the barn, and Clara climbed alone to the loft, and the space between what they were and what they weren't felt wider than the mountains. Jack was careful with her, too careful maybe. He asked permission before touching anything of hers, knocked before entering rooms, left the cabin entirely when she needed to bathe or change Noah. It was respectful and maddening all at once. "You don't have to leave every time," Clara said one evening after he'd excused himself for the third time that day. "This is your home. It's your home too now. You deserve privacy. I'm your wife, Jack. We're going to have to figure out how to exist in the same space eventually." He'd just nodded and left anyway, and Clara had wanted to throw something at the door. On the 8th day of their marriage, everything changed. Clara was hanging laundry when she heard the horses, multiple horses coming fast. Her hands went automatically to the rifle she now kept propped against the cabin wall whenever she was outside. Jack was in the far pasture with Pete too far to hear. Kid had ridden into town for supplies. She was alone. The riders came into view, 5 men led by Samuel Blackwood. The banker looked different than he had at the auction, harder. His white suit was dusty and his eyes were cold with purpose. Mrs. Mercer, he called out, pulling his horse up short. Or should I still call you Mrs. Hayes? I hear the marriage was rather rushed. Clara raised the rifle. Her hands were steady now, all that practice paying off. You're not welcome here, Mr. Blackwood. Leave. Can't do that. I have business with your husband. Jack's not here. Then I suppose you'll have to do. Blackwood dismounted and his men followed suit. You see, I've been doing some investigating. Turns out Jack Mercer doesn't actually own this land. The deed's in question. Some irregularity with the original sale. Clara's stomach dropped. That's a lie. Is it funny thing about frontier property ownership gets murky. Papers get lost, claims get contested. Blackwood smiled. I've filed a counterclaim with the territorial office, which means until this is resolved, technically this property is in dispute, which means you're squatting on potentially stolen land. You can't do this. I already have, but I'm a reasonable man, Mrs. Mercer. I'm willing to drop the claim if Jack agrees to certain terms. What terms? He leaves Montana for good, signs over any interest in this property, and disappears. In exchange, I'll drop the claim and let you stay. You and the baby can remain here unmolested, with enough money to hire help. Clara stared at him. You want me to convince Jack to leave? I want him gone. I don't particularly care how it happens. Blackwood's voice went hard. He's been a thorn in my side for 2 years. I tried being subtle. I tried legal means. Now I'm done playing games. He goes or I make life very difficult for both of you. And if I refuse, then I'll make sure every bit of property in this county knows you're living on disputed land. I'll have the sheriff evict you. I'll contest your marriage on grounds of fraud, claiming Jack married you to establish residency on property he doesn't own. I'll make it so you can't show your face in Redemption Creek without being arrested. The trap was elegant, ruthless. Either Jack left and she stayed alone, or they both lost everything. Blackwood had found the one pressure point that might actually work. Get off our land, Clara said, her voice shaking with rage rather than fear. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, I file formal eviction papers. Blackwood mounted his horse. Think carefully, Mrs. Mercer. Is Jack really worth losing everything? They rode away in a cloud of dust. Clara stood there trembling, the rifle heavy in her hands, watching until they disappeared. Then her legs gave out and she sank onto the porch steps. This was what Jack had warned her about. This was the consequence of standing up to Blackwood. He'd found a new way to attack a more vicious one. And now Clara had to decide what to do with the information. She could tell Jack, let him make the choice. But she knew what he'd choose, he'd fight, and they'd both lose. Or she could keep it to herself, could try to find another way out, could protect him the way he'd protected her. The sound of hoofbeats pulled her from her thoughts. Jack was riding back, probably having seen Blackwood's dust trail. He dismounted in one smooth motion, his face dark with concern. What happened? Are you hurt? I'm fine. Blackwood came by. Jack's jaw clenched. What did he want? Clara met his eyes, made a decision. To threaten us, to try to scare me, same as always. It wasn't a complete lie, just an omission, but Jack saw through it anyway. Clara, what did he really say? It doesn't matter. Like hell it doesn't. Jack came up the steps, sat beside her. We don't keep secrets. That was part of this deal. Honesty between us. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to protect him from having to make an impossible choice. But he was right. They'd promised honesty. He says you don't own this land, she said quietly. Says there's some irregularity with the deed. He's filed a counterclaim. Jack went very still. What else? He offered a deal. You leave Montana and he drops the claim. I get to stay here with Noah. He'll provide money for help. He wants to separate us. Yes. And you were thinking about not telling me. It wasn't a question. Clara looked down at her hands. I was thinking about protecting you, about finding another way. There is no other way. Jack's voice was flat. He's been planning this. That's why he didn't fight harder when I bought you. He was already working on this. getting the paperwork in order, buying off whoever he needed to buy. "So what do we do?" Jack was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "I could leave. You and Noah would be safe. You'd have the cabin, the land security, everything I promised to give you." "No." "Clara." "I said no." She turned to face him. "You think I married you just to send you away the first time things got hard? You think I want to be alone here with Blackwood's money, knowing he won? You'd be safe. I'd be his charity case, his proof that he always wins. I won't do it, Jack. I won't let him break us apart." Something fierce and grateful flashed in Jack's eyes. "Then we fight. How if the land isn't yours? The land is mine. I bought it legal with a proper deed, but Blackwood's right, that frontier property gets complicated. If he's got a judge in his pocket willing to contest it, he can tie this up in court for years, bleed us dry with legal fees while he makes sure we can't make a living." Clara felt despair creeping in. "So we can't win?" "I didn't say that." Jack stood paced to the edge of the porch. "There might be one way, risky as hell, but possible." "Tell me." "I need to go to Helena, to the Territorial Land Office. If I can get them to confirm my deed before Blackwood's counterclaim is officially filed, his challenge becomes worthless. But it's a 3-day ride each way, and I'd have to leave you here alone. Pete and Kid won't be enough if Blackwood decides to make his move while I'm gone. He could come with the sheriff, claim you're squatting, force you out. By the time I got back, you'd be gone, and he'd have possession, 9/10 of the law and all that." Clara thought fast. "Then I come with you." "Clara, it's a hard ride with Noah. We've done harder. We survived an auction block. We survived Blackwood's first attempt. We can survive a ride to Helena." Jack looked at her for a long moment. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. We're in this together now, for better or worse, remember." A smile tugged at Jack's mouth. "I remember." They left at dawn the next morning. Jack had sent Pete to warn Mary and Elizabeth they'd be gone and to keep an eye on the property. Kid would stay behind to tend the animals and watch for Blackwood. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best they could do. The ride was brutal. Noah fussed in the carrier Clara had rigged from blankets, uncomfortable and confused. The trail was steep in places, muddy in others from recent rain. They stopped frequently to rest the horses and let Clara feed the baby, but Jack pushed a hard pace, clearly worried about time. On the second day, Noah developed a fever. Clara noticed it during a rest stop. His skin was hot to the touch, his crying different from his usual complaints. Panic clawed at her throat. "Jack, something's wrong." He was beside her in an instant. Felt Noah's forehead, checked him over with surprising gentleness. "Could be the travel, could be he's catching something. We need to get him somewhere warm and dry. There's nothing out here. There's a way station about 2 hours ahead, run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. We can stop there, let him rest." They made it to the way station as the sun was setting. Mrs. Patterson took one look at the sick baby and ushered them inside, clucking like a worried hen. She made a bed by the fire for Noah, brewed some kind of tea from herbs Clara didn't recognize. "He'll be fine," she assured them. "Babies spike fevers all the time. You keep him warm, get fluids in him. He'll be right as rain by morning." But morning came and Noah was worse. His fever had climbed higher. His crying was weak, and Clara was terrified in a way she hadn't been since the auction. This was different. This was her baby, her son possibly dying because she'd dragged him on a desperate ride through the mountains. "We should go back," she said, rocking Noah frantically. "We need a doctor. We need—" "The nearest doctor is in Helena," Jack said quietly. 2 days back to Redemption Creek, and Doc Williams is drunk more often than sober anyway. We're better off pushing forward." "But what if we don't make it in time? What if he—" Clara couldn't say it, couldn't voice the fear that was eating her alive. Jack knelt beside her, put his hand on her shoulder. "He's going to be fine. Noah's strong. He's a fighter, just like his mother. You don't know that. I do. because he survived this much already, and because I'm not going to let anything happen to him, to either of you. That's my promise, Clara. We're going to make it to Helena. We're going to fix this land problem, and we're all going to come home together. Understand?" Clara wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and Jack pulled her close. Let her cry against his shoulder while Noah whimpered between them. They stayed at the way station for another day. Mrs. Patterson tended Noah with the skill of someone who'd raised 6 children of her own. The fever broke on the 3rd morning, and Noah opened his eyes and smiled at Clara like nothing had happened. The relief was so intense Clara nearly fainted. Jack caught her, held her steady, and they stood there in the small way station with their baby smiling between them both, shaking with the aftermath of fear. "We should rest another day," Mrs. Patterson suggested. "Make sure he's really recovered." But Jack shook his head. "We don't have another day. Blackwood's deadline is tomorrow." So they rode on. Noah seemed better, babbling and grabbing at Clara's hair like he usually did, but the scare had changed something. Clara rode with Jack's arms around her and the baby, and she found herself leaning back against his chest, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Jack noticed. His arms tightened, slightly protective, and Clara didn't pull away. They reached Helena late on the 5th day, later than Jack had wanted, but Noah's illness had cost them time. The territorial office was closed, wouldn't open until morning. Jack found them a room at a boarding house and paid extra for a hot bath and a real meal. Clara bathed Noah first, then herself, washing away days of trail dust. When she came out of the bathing room, Jack had food waiting, real food, not trail rations. Roast chicken and potatoes and bread that was still warm. "Eat," he said. "You barely touched anything for 2 days." I was too worried. "I know, but he's better now. You need to take care of yourself too." They ate in companionable silence. Noah fell asleep in his makeshift bed, exhausted but healthy. Jack sat by the window watching the street below like he expected Blackwood to appear at any moment. "Jack," Clara said quietly, "come away from the window. You need rest too." "I'll rest when this is done. You'll be useless tomorrow if you don't sleep." He smiled tiredly. Probably true, but he didn't move. Clara stood, walked over to him, put her hand on his arm. "We made it this far together. Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll face it together too. But tonight, you need to sleep." Jack looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. Something in his expression made Clara's breath catch. "I was terrified," he admitted, "when Noah got sick. I kept thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if this trip kills him? What if I cost you your son because I was too stubborn to just leave Montana like Blackwood wanted? You didn't cost me anything. This was my choice too." "Was it, or did I pressure you into it?" "Jack Mercer, you have never pressured me into anything, not once." Clara squeezed his arm. "I chose to marry you. I chose to come on this trip. I choose to stand beside you tomorrow when you walk into that land office. Those are my choices, not yours." "Why?" The question burst out of him. "Why choose this? Why choose me? You could have taken Blackwood's deal, could have had everything without the risk, because having everything means nothing if you're alone. Because Blackwood's version of winning is everyone else losing. Because—" Clara stopped, took a breath. "Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just the man who saved me. You became the man I want to build a life with, and I'll be damned if I let Samuel Blackwood take that away." Jack's eyes widened. "Clara, I know we married for practical reasons. I know I said I wasn't ready for this to be real, but Jack, these last weeks watching you with Noah, seeing how you treat people, how you never give up, even when everything's against you." Her voice shook. "I think I might be falling in love with you, and that terrifies me more than Blackwood ever could." The silence stretched between them. Then Jack cupped her face in his hands, gentle as if she were made of glass. "I've been in love with you since the moment you raised that rifle at Blackwood's men and told them to get off our land," he said. "I didn't plan it, didn't want it, but there it is. You're brave and fierce and so damn beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes. And if we lose everything tomorrow, if Blackwood wins, and we have to start over with nothing, I'll still count myself lucky because I got to call you my wife." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "That's the most words I've ever heard you say at once. I'm not good with words, but I needed you to know, needed you to understand that this isn't duty or obligation anymore. This is real for me. Has been for a while." "Then stop sleeping in the barn." Jack froze. "What?" "When we get home, stop sleeping in the barn. We're married, Jack. Really married. And I'm tired of pretending we're not." "Clara, are you sure? Because I can wait." "I'll wait as long as you need." She kissed him, cut off his words with her lips, pouring everything she felt into it. Jack made a sound low in his throat and kissed her back, his hands sliding into her hair, his body pressing close. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "When we get home," he promised. "When we get home," she agreed. The next morning they walked into the territorial land office hand in hand. The clerk was a pinch-faced man who looked annoyed at being bothered so early. Jack presented his deed and explained the situation, while Clara stood beside him, Noah on her hip. The clerk examined the papers, checked them against his records, frowned. "There's a counterclaim filed here," he said, "from a Samuel Blackwood. Says there's irregularities with the original sale." "The original sale was legal," Jack said firmly. "I have the documentation right here, signed by the previous owner, witnessed by a notary, filed with the county recorder. Mr. Blackwood claims the previous owner didn't have the right to sell, that the land was actually owned by a third party who—" "That's a lie." Clara's voice rang out clear and strong. "Samuel Blackwood is a con man who's been stealing property from widows and orphans for years. He's trying to steal our land because my husband stood up to him. If you validate his claim, you're helping him commit fraud." The clerk blinked, startled by her vehemence. "Ma'am, I'm just following procedure." "Then follow it correctly. Check the original land grant. Check every piece of paper in your files. You'll see that Jack Mercer owns that land legally, and Samuel Blackwood is filing a false claim." The clerk looked between them. Then slowly he started pulling files. It took 2 hours of checking and cross-referencing. 2 hours of Clara pacing with Noah while Jack stood rigid as a statue waiting. Finally the clerk looked up. "The deed is valid," he said. "Mr. Mercer, you are the legal owner of record. Mr. Blackwood's counterclaim has no merit." Relief hit Clara so hard she swayed. Jack caught her elbow, steadying her. "Will you put that in writing?" Jack asked. "I can issue a certificate of clear title. It'll supersede any county-level challenges. Cost you $5. "Done." They walked out of that office an hour later with a document that declared in official territorial language that the land was Jack's, that Blackwood's claim was rejected, that they'd won. On the street, Clara stopped, set Noah down in his carrier, turned to Jack and threw her arms around his neck. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Jack held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "We did, together." The ride home took 4 days. They went slower, letting Noah rest, stopping when he needed to. No more desperate pushing, just steady progress toward the life waiting for them. They arrived at the cabin on a clear evening just as the sun was setting behind the mountains. The place looked the same, small and sturdy and home. Pete came out of the barn, saw them, and broke into a huge grin. "You made it, kid, they made it." Kid came running, shouting questions. They all talked at once, Jack showing the certificate, Pete explaining that Blackwood had come by twice looking for them, furious both times. "Sheriff said he'd be back with eviction papers," Pete said, "but I told him you'd gone to Helena. He rode off cursing up a storm." "He can curse all he wants," Jack said. "We've got clear title now. He's got nothing." After Pete and Kid left, Clara and Jack stood in the yard, watching the last light fade from the sky. Noah was asleep in Clara's arms, exhausted from the journey. "I should put him down," she said. I'll help." They went inside together. Clara climbed to the loft and settled Noah in his cradle. When she climbed back down, Jack was banking the fire, moving around the cabin with familiar ease. "Jack," she said softly. He turned. "You're not sleeping in the barn tonight." No, you're sleeping here with me, like we're supposed to." Jack crossed the room in 3 strides, pulled her into his arms and kissed her like he'd been dying to for weeks. Clara kissed him back, all the fear and relief and love of the last days pouring out between them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack smiled, really smiled, open and joyful, in a way she'd never seen. "I love you, Clara Mercer." "I love you too, Jack." That night they finally became husband and wife in every sense of the word. It was gentle and awkward and perfect, 2 broken people finding wholeness in each other. Afterward they lay tangled together in the bed, Clara's head on Jack's chest, his hand stroking her hair. "Thank you," she whispered to it. "For what? For riding up late to that auction, for saying you'd take us, for giving me a reason to fight instead of just survive." Jack kissed her forehead. "Thank you for saying yes, for trusting me, for being brave enough to build something new." Clara traced the scar on his shoulder, the long one from the war. "Tell me about this." "Tomorrow. We've got all the time in the world now." "All the time in the world," Clara echoed. She fell asleep listening to Jack's heartbeat, Noah breathing softly in his cradle nearby, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt completely, perfectly safe. The next morning, Samuel Blackwood rode up to the cabin with the sheriff and a territorial marshal. He had eviction papers and a smug smile and was clearly expecting to find an empty cabin or a desperate couple ready to surrender. Instead, he found Jack and Clara on the porch, coffee in hand, waiting for him. "You're trespassing, Mercer," Blackwood called out. "I've got legal papers here, and I've got this." Jack held up the certificate of clear title. "Issued by the Territorial Land Office. Says this land is mine, legal and proper. Your counterclaim was rejected." Blackwood's face went purple. "That's impossible. You filed a fraudulent claim based on lies. The marshal there can confirm it if you'd like." Jack's voice was calm. "You lost, Blackwood. It's over." The marshal, a weathered man named Anderson, examined Jack's certificate, looked at Blackwood's papers, then back at the certificate. "Mr. Mercer's right," he said. "This supersedes anything at the county level. The land's his. But I have a judge's order from a county judge with no jurisdiction over territorial land grants." Anderson's voice was hard. "In fact, Mr. Blackwood filing false claims is a serious offense. You want to press this, I'll have to investigate all your land dealings. Might find some other interesting irregularities." The threat was clear. Blackwood could walk away now, or he could face real consequences. Clara watched the calculation happen on his face, saw the moment he realized he'd finally lost. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it is." Clara stepped forward, and this time she wasn't afraid. "You tried to sell me. You tried to take our land. You failed both times. Go back to town, Mr. Blackwood. Find someone else to torment. We're done with you." Blackwood stared at her, fury and frustration warring on his face. Then he yanked his horse around and rode away without another word. The sheriff followed, looking relieved to be leaving. The marshal tipped his hat to Jack and Clara before mounting up. "You folks have a good day now," he said. When they were gone, Clara turned to Jack. "It's really over. It's really over." Clara laughed. Then she started crying. Then she was laughing and crying at the same time, while Jack held her and Noah babbled happily from inside the cabin, and the Montana sun rose higher over mountains that suddenly looked less harsh and more like home. 6 months later, Clara stood in that same yard, hanging laundry, while Jack repaired the fence, and Noah toddled in the grass, chasing chickens. Mary and Elizabeth were inside preparing lunch. They visited often now, along with other families from town. The cabin felt too small some days, bursting with life and laughter. Jack was talking about building an addition. Maybe 2 rooms, he'd said, for when Noah got older, for when other children came. Clara touched her stomach where she suspected another baby was already growing. She hadn't told Jack yet. Was waiting for the right moment. She heard his footsteps turn to find him behind her with that soft look he got sometimes when he watched her work. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing. Just thinking about how lucky I am." "Lucky we almost lost everything. Almost only counts in horseshoes." Jack pulled her close, kissed her soundly. "We didn't lose, we won. We've got land and a home and each other. I'd say that makes us the luckiest people in Montana." Clara looked at their cabin at Noah, playing in the sunshine at the mountains, standing watch over it all. Thought about the auction block and the fear and the desperate bargain that had become the greatest love of her life. "You know what the best part is," she said. "What's that? I'm not yours because you bought me. I'm yours because I chose you, and you're mine because you chose me back. That's worth more than all the gold in the world." Jack's eyes went bright. "That it is, Mrs. Mercer, that it is." They stood there together in the yard they'd fought for, building a life they'd nearly lost, loving each other with the fierce devotion of 2 people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and refused to let go. Clara had come to Montana as Thomas Hayes's wife, lost everything, and been sold like property on an auction block. But she was leaving that woman behind, with every passing day becoming instead Clara Mercer, rancher's wife, mother, survivor, fighter, a woman who'd been bought but had chosen to stay, a woman who'd turned a transaction into a marriage into love, and love into a life worth living, and that she thought, as Jack's arms tightened around her and Noah's laughter rang out across their land, was the greatest freedom of all.